mitzugeben Covid für eine noble, königliche Frau, Miriam Banker, die gewähnte Eiches Chove von Miriam Banker. Ich will sagen, 2 Kapitel Tillim, mit Eiches Chaya noch einmal den Rest von den Maspiden. Du hast mit Kapitel Tezayin. Michtam le David, shom reini Eiki Chisisi Boch. Umat la Adoinoi Utu, Toivusi Balo Lechu. Ligdoishe Mashe Beuretz Haimu, Vadirei Kol Chefzai Bvom. Yilbi Atzvoisam Acha Mahudi, Al Esach Neskayim Medom, Ival Esu Shemoisam Al Fusoi. Doinoim nos Chelki Koisi, Atu Toimer Geruli, Chavulem Nofli Banimim, Af Nachlas Shofru Ulai. Avulach as Adoin Rashiutzuni, Af Lailois Iselini Kilioisoi. Shivisi Adoinoi Lenegdi Summit, Kimimini Bal Emoid. Lechain Sumach Libi, Yugel Kvoidi, Abesuri Yishkon Levetach. Kiloi Sadvoiv Nafshi Leshoil, Lesitn Chasedechu Liroi Suchas, Toidi Aini Oide Chayim, Soive Smuchoid Es Penechon Imois Binchon Netzach. Jetzt haben wir so ein Joshua Besaise. Kapitel Tzadik Aleph. Yoshai Besaise Elioim Bezaishada Yisloinon. Oima la Adoinoi Machsim Mitzidusi Elahai Eftach Boy. Ki Etzilchum in Pach Yukish, Bedeve Havois. Bevrusa Yusach Loch, Sachas Knov Vesechse, Sinu Vesachayra Mitoi. Lesilum in Pach Ad Loilum Chayziv Yoimom. Bedeve Boifer Yahaloch, Mketi Yushat Zeroyim. Yiboi Mitzitchu Elev, Ruben Minechu Alecho Yigoish. Rag by Nechu Sabit, the Shlimas Shum Tide. Ki Alto Adoina Maxi, Elio Samta Moinechu. Lesina Alechu, Ruben Nega, Layikabo Alechu. Ki Malucha of Yitzhav Loch, the Shmorchu Bechodre Chechu. Al Kapayim is Inchu, Pentigoi Beim Raglechu, Al Shacha of Festen, Tidroich. Tidemois, Kefive Sanin. Kvi Chushag Afatai, Esagvai, Guda Shemi, Iko Aini Vanai, Imanochi Betsulu, Achatzai Chadai, Oidach Yumemaz Biai, Rabish Yusi. Jetzt sind wir so ein Eiches Chai, Pusik, noch begann. Eiches Chai, me Yimsu, Veluchak, Mini Michra. Butach bo Alai Balo, Shula lo Yechsa. Gemlasi Toi velo Yiru, Koyim Raichayeyu. Dol Shul Tzeme Yifishtim, Betat Bechayvetz Kapeyu. Hoizu Kini Oisoicha Mimecha Ktuvi Lachmo. Vatukam Boid Lailu Vatitan Tele Levaisa V'choygan Haraseyu. Zamu Musude Vatigechayi, Pri Chapei Notikurem. Choglu Biois Masneyu V'tamad Zoyeseyu. Tu Amu Ki Toi Sachro Leyichbe B'layla Nairo. Yidei Shucha Bakisho V'chapei Tom Chifulach. Kappa Posel Uni V'yidei Shucha Le'evyoin. Leisido Levaisa Meshule Ki Kol Vaisas Uvishunim. Mavadem also Solo Shaisha Guman Levisho. Noida Bashurim Balo Shiftam Diknei Uretz. Sudu also Batimkoi Vagoy Nosen Laknani. Oiz Vehuda Levisho Vatischok Leoim Achroim. Pio Pascho Bechachmu Sares Chesed Al Shoino. So viel Lichas Beiso Lechem Asas Leisoichal. Kumi Veneu Vashriu Balo Vehalalo. Rabois Bunois Usi Choyel Atrusa Kalunu. Sheika Chaim Vevel Ayoifi. Ishu Yiras Aldoino Hites Halo. Nilo Prio Deu Val Shur Maseyu.
Shkoyo Rav Zucker.
Today is Rosh Chodesh, and Rosh Chodesh no has paid him. I'm just going to say over a word from the Chassam Sefer. The Pasuk, like Tzav David as Shlomo Benoi, David commanded his son Shlomo Lemor, Anoichi hoylech b'derech kol haaretz. This is what David is being mitzaveh his son Shlomo. Anoichi hoylech b'derech kol haaretz. I'm leaving this world. V'chazakto v'yisa leish. V'shamato es mishmeres Hashem Elokim l'leches b'drachav. Feitach Sam Sefer Akasha, Anoichi hoylech b'derech kol haaretz l'chayre is not part of his tzivui. The Pasuk should have said first, V'yoyme Anoichi hoylech, I'm about to leave this world, and then Vayitzaveyu, and he commanded him, V'chazakto v'yisa leish v'shamato es mishmeres. But from the Pasuk it seems that Anoichi hoylech b'derech kol haaretz is a chelik of his tzivui, that he's being mitzaveh his son Shlomo. Dr. Chassam Sefer Shared Azoi. A person is called a hoylech. As long as a person is alive, he's a hoylech. He's going mimadrega l'madrega. He's kseidah growing, does mitzvahs, Torah, chesed, tznius. He's kseidah going mimadrega l'madrega. He's kseidah being mashlim his nefesh. But that's only as long as he's alive. Once his neshama leaves the guf, then he's an oimeid. Because a mace is mesim chavshi. Once a person leaves this world, there's no mitzvahs any longer. Kim shemeis adam nafsa chavshi min ha-mitzvahs. However, Dr. Chassam Sefer, there is a way that even lacham isasoi, he could remain a hoylech. Because a bra is mezaka abba. A son is mezaka his father. A son is mezaka his mother. And Chazal say, Kol ha-meniach ben k'maisoi ki lo meis. If someone leaves a child, he leaves children who continue his derech of avodas Hashem, it's ki lo meis. Yesh la'av chelik b'masa haben. Because the father has a chelik in the mitzvahs, in the Torah that the child continues doing. And Mamela, the father, even after his neshama left this world, v'hoylech maila b'kodesh. He continues being a hoylech even after he leaves this world. V'yesh lo mahalchem bein ha'oimdim. Dr. Chassam Sefer, that is David Melech Sivui to his son Shlomo, Vayitzav Shlomo Benoi, Anoichi hoylech, I want to remain a hoylech. I'm being mitzaveh you, ani Anoichi hoylech b'derech kol haaretz. I want to be from those who are who continue, who remain a hoylech even after they leave this world. In other words, he's telling his son Shlomo, how would that happen? V'chazakta v'yisa leish, v'shamato es mishmeres Hashem Elokim, l'leches b'drachav. If you continue going in the ways of the Eibishter, that way I will remain a hoylech even after I leave this world. And this was the tzivui of David HaMelech to Shlomo. Anoichi hoylech, I want to remain a hoylech b'derech kol haaretz. Even after I leave this world, I want to remain a hoylech. And it's up to you, Shlomo, to continue. If you continue in the ways of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, That way I will remain a hoylech even after I leave this world. The Nifteres was like to have children, children who go b'derech ha-Torah, b'derech ha-Avodah. She will remain a hoylech even now that she left this world, and she no longer is able to do mitzvahs herself, but she will remain a hoyleches, l'netzach l'tzochim, because she has children and grandchildren that continue her derech ha-Torah and derech ha-Avodah, and that's the greatest chus that she could have. Ubila maves l'netzach, u'moch Hashem Elokim dima me'al kol panim.
Rav Adayan or Rav first?
All gathering together today to give Kovod Achron to Miriam Shifra Bas, Rav Moshe Shmuel. Like Rabbi Zucker mentioned, to Shchodesh you're not maspid. Only the immediate family. But Divrei Shvach in the Yehuda says, on Rosh Chodesh is also permissible, even not the immediate family. Mrs. Banker was a survivor of the Milchama. She's one of the few that made it to America and remained from. Gedolei Yisrael said, those who went through the Milchama and they remained Shomrei Torah mitzvahs, those will never be right Pnei Gehenim when they're nifter. But Mrs. Banker was even more than that. She was zeicha to see Olam Haba in this world. She saw a wonderful family grow, having such nachas of seeing the growth of her children and grandchildren, moving to Chicago a number of years ago. She was able to see daily her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren go b'derech ha-Torah and b'derech ha-Yira. The kibbutz avim of a son and daughter, and especially b'Seif Yomel, how they spent days and nights with her. What more could she have asked from the Rebbeinu Shalom? She should be our good to better for a wonderful family. They should all continue and there she was so proud of. The way her children and grandchildren going b'derech ha-Torah b'derech ha-Yira. B'il mos netzach u'moch Hashem dimu al kol panim.
Klal Yisrael, the Klolius, is in the middle of the Shiva and the Nechemta. It made Tanchumim for the Avelus Kloli of the Churban Beis HaMikdash. But for us, during these Yemei Tanchumim, we're beginning an Avelus Prati, Avelus for our mother. As the Rosh Koel and the Dayan said, it's Rosh Chodesh. We have to be Mekatzer a little bit. Pasuk says, Shema b'ni musar avicha v'al titlesh toiras imecha. The Chayra, it should have said, Shema b'ni toiras avicha u'musar avicha, u'musar imecha. Torah is typically something which is transmitted to the children by the father, not the mother. Why does it say toiras imecha? It would seem that there is a special muhus of toiras imecha, a special inyan of Torah that the mother imparts to the children as well. We were zeicha to a tremendous Yerusha of Torah Simecha. Klal Yisrael in the stein with three midos, Chazal say. Rachmanim, Baishanim, Goyim Lechasodim. My mother, Aleh Shalom, excelled in all those three areas. Rachmanim, when she heard about a sorrow someone was going through, whether it was a family member, a friend, or something she heard about or read about in the paper, she felt as if it was her own. She gave a krechs, oi, how's this person going to get through this situation? By Shonim, she was an Isha Tznuah, quiet, refined, always trying to stay out of the limelight, never varfing sich berabim, just doing what she was supposed to do to serve Hashem. Goyim Lechasodim, many years ago, before the proliferation of bigger chaylim apartments in hospitals across America, she was heavily involved in the founding and the ongoing operation of one of the first apartments in Manhattan through the Kosan of Bikkur Chaylim. There was a young girl from Savannah who came to New York to go to high school. She needed a place to stay. My parents took her in for years with open arms and treated her like a daughter. My mother had an uncanny knack of being able to connect very personally to different people of different backgrounds and of all ages. Whether it was her contemporaries, of which there are so few left, from the Altaheim in Borough Park, whether it was her American-born neighbors in her building, whether it was young people who used to see her and loved talking to her, she had an uncanny ability of being able to connect on a deep level to every one of those types of people. And they all loved her because she loved all of them. She told me many times, as she was going through various medical crises, which she had many of, I had no tinus under by the shalaylam. Al piderech hateva, I should have been dead at 10 years old. That's when the Nazis in Achshamam came into her town and rounded up all the Yidden to the ghetto. Siyata Deshmaya, through miraculous nisim, she survived with her parents and her brother, spending 5 years in Italy, 2.5 years hidden in an underground bunker, never seeing the light of day, and then coming to America, getting married to my father, Olav Shalom, and building a mishpacha, which she was so proud of. Children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. That was our Torah Simecha. That's the Yerusha of Torah Simecha that we were zeicha to have all the years. A number of thank yous must be spoken. First and foremost, Dr. Hertzke Greenblatt, who was zeicha to be the shliach of the Rebbeinu Shalom so many times to pull her out of very serious situations, especially at the end. These last 2 weeks when she was in the hospital, he guided us through every step of the way, every single day and every single night. Rabbi Aaron Wolf, Rabbi Shmuley Masliach from Chicago Mitzvah Campaign on Refuah, and all the members of Hatzalah, who we made use of their services so many times. They should all be gebenched with gesund. Her caregivers over the years, who were so devoted to her and cared for her so caringly, we thank you and appreciate all you've done. And my father's levaya, almost 4 years ago, I said a story about a Ochra who was read a shidduch to a girl, and he didn't want to go out with the girl because the girl only had one sibling, and he didn't want to have 50% of the burden of caring for his in-laws when they got older. And I said then that if that Miduberes would have been my sister, he wouldn't have had to worry, because she did far more than 50% of the burden of caring for my father. With my mother, Allah has kama v'kama, the amount of time and care and love that she showed day in, day out, managing the medical appointments, managing the medicines, managing the revolving door of the caregivers, taking her wherever she needed to go, whenever she needed to go. That was her priority in life, and she has a very busy schedule. She took her into her house for months at a time. I have to thank my Shvaga David. Not always easy taking a shvigar into your house, but he did it with open arms and an open heart. My niece Chani, who was the only child living in the house at the time, spent hours and hours making Bobby happy, talking to her, schmoozing with her. Bobby loved her so very much. I must single out my daughter Esti, who made it her business out of her very busy schedule to go and visit my mother every single day. And 2 weeks ago, at Friday night, and she was with her for Shabbos, she literally saved her life by noticing something was wrong and calling Hatzalah. The Eibush is helping that we should have a good debate in Shemayim. She should go up, join my father in Zichron Livracha, Poil Yeshuas for any children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren that may need them in all areas. Yemelis Yosher for the Klal Yisrael, Ubila Hamos L'Netzach U'Mocha Hashem B'Lekim Dimma Mi'al Kapanim.
Doyle Rabbanan mentioned today is Rosh Chodesh. We're not maspid. Very difficult task. Very, very difficult. But and HaKadosh Baruch Hu Hoda'od Am Yisrael Lacha. And we're going to hopefully be zeicha to Siyata D'Shmaya and Mekam Da'alacha. Chodesh Elul today. Chodesh Elul. Moshe Shapiro Zatzal used to say that Elul is the 6th month of the year. 6 numbers in Yiddishkeit have meaning. Abba represents Gula, Echod is a lokus. 6, he used to say, represents Achona. Vayom HaShishi V'echinu Es Asher Yaviyu. And he used to say the following: K'mo she'yom hashishi mechen l'yom hashvi, kachi chodesh hashishi mechen l'chodesh hashvi. Just like the 6th day of the week is mechen for Shabbos, Misha Terech be'erev Shabbos yorcha b'Shabbos, so too the 6th month of the year, Elul, is mechen for the 7th month of the year. And somebody who's mechen in chodesh hashishi, Hashem will be zeicha to a good din, So our avoid this Elul starting with V'chai Yiten Alipai. Suffered a tragic loss, very tragic loss for the Mishpacha. On the Schnell side, the Schnell children, they have no more grandparents anymore. V'chai Yiten Alipai. So say a little chizuk, a little divrei shvach. The Medrash says in yesterday's parsha, Shomar Tishmarun, Omar Bar Kapora, HaNefesh v'Torah Nimshu Tener. The neshama, the nefesh of a person, and the Torah are compared to a ner, a candle. HaNefesh diksiv ner Hashem nishmas adam, v'Torah diksiv kener mitzvah v'Torah or. Omar Kodesh Baruch Hu Adam. Rebbeinu Shalom says to man, Neiri biyotcha. My ner is in your hands, referring to the Hail of Torah. V'nercha, and your ner, your nefesh is biyodi. Neri biyotcha zu Torah, v'nercha biyodi zu nefesh. Im shamarta es neri, if you will watch my ner, mishamer es nercha, I'll watch your ner. V'im kavisa es neri, ani mechab es nercha. Minayin diksiv raki shormocho shmor nafshecha moed. Havi ki yoim ki im shmor tishmeron. Rani Shalom, Kavi Yochel says to a person, watch my ner, watch my Torah, and I'll watch over you. My shver, my shviger, they survived Nazi Germany. They were Polish Yidden. The war started famously on September 1st, 1939. Shrewe said they were learning in Shiva, he was praying for take a bechina, and Chach Me'o Blin, 200 Blat Gemara, Rashi Taisvis, and they're holding a Durham Daf Mem, as he used to tell us every Pesach. Never forgot where they were holding in Yeshiva. And then, Gabba Yibakwap, and everybody went home. And most people never came back. But he and my shviger, they were zoichet to be from the few Polish Yidden that survived. Came to America, eventually, each one with their own story. Got married in the early 1950s. and built a Mishpocha L'Shem Usiferes. Dr. Herzog Tzadi Greenblatt told me a few days ago that they had 2 children, but it was as if they had 10, as Avi just mentioned. He couldn't imagine 10 children taking better care than these 2 children took care of their parents. But it came from somewhere. The Shir and the Shviger, they lived a hecher life. They lived a different type of life. It was a life from the Alta Heim. They got up in the morning early. The Shviger went 5 o'clock to the Daf Yomi. The Shviger got up. She made breakfast. They ate breakfast. He went to work. He went to the Daf Yomi, to Bianca Horowitz. We finished the Daf. Several machzorim. Shviger went to public school. She worked in a public school office. She came home. She took care of her children. She took care of her husband. Their life revolved around the Reb Domsker Beis Medrash. They were patient. Their lives didn't revolve around vacations. It didn't revolve around the next good eatery. It revolved around the home, the children, and the Beis Medrash. My children were fortunate. My nephews and nieces, they got to go Yom Tovim, Shabbosim, to the Reb Domsker Beis Medrash, 43rd Street and 14th Avenue. Number of Udim Shehutzu Me'ayesh davened there, and it was an experience that's left an indelible print on their lives. Me as an American Yankee Doodle, it was an eye-opener for me also. I can't be Meshayar and put into words what this chinuch did for our family. My shviger didn't have a trace of gaiva. Ramban writes in Igeres Ramban, that's Midah Roa Mikol Hamidus. There was no gaiva. A number of people, when they heard about the Ptira, said that my shviger, people had the same comment. She was an elegant woman. Elegant woman. And she was an elegant woman. But it's interesting. I don't think she owned a designer piece of clothing. I don't know if she ever bought a sheitel that had a 4-figure price tag. Maybe at the end, because he couldn't get one any other kind. Designer shoes. But she radiated elegance, because she was an Isha Kseiras Eretzon Bible. She understood the tachlis of life. They understood the meaning of life. They saw what they saw in Europe. They spoke about it rarely, but they lived it every day. They knew they were from the lucky ones. They knew it's not for our generation to don anybody who came out of the war, what happened to different people, but they understood their mission, as did all their friends and that whole generation. And everything that we have today, the reborn Klal Yisrael that we have in America and Eretz Yisrael, we all owe this generation. And our mishpocha, we owe it to my shviger and my shviger. They were very special people. Very, very special. And unfortunately, this generation is lost. We're losing them. How many are left in Chicago? How many Polish Yidden are left that suffer from the Yimach Shemamniks for 6 years and came out with a moon and mitochen, stark like Isaac? Who's going to teach our children? Who's going to teach our grandchildren? Who's going to teach them how to be a Yid? Who's going to teach them the folly of their Amerikanishkeit that we all have in ourselves? We can't help it. We live in a friendly Golas. They understood the difference between a Yid and a Goy and a much hecher darga. These are all the challenges that we have today. But we're fortunate that we had role models that were very, very special. And the Rebbeinu Shalom says, Neir biyotcha v'neircha biyodi. Im shamartis neiri ani mishamris nercha. My shviger was zoiche to Doris Yishar Mavorach. 2 children that I don't have to be Meirich because the whole community knows who and what they are and what they stand for. She was zoiche to grandchildren, Marbitei Torah, Machzikei Torah, Oimdei Torah, Oivdei Hashem, Yirei Hashem. The Rebbeinu Shalom Kaviyachol makes a promise, and he keeps it. He keeps it. But I hope I could say that Rebbeinu Shalom, he had really good shutfim. He had really good shutfim here. Shloisha shutfim b'adam. I don't think even Kavi Yochel could ask for better shutfim. The Messiah. Hope it was Divrei Chizuk and Isiris. Divrei Shvachan and Ifteris. We're going to miss her. It was a schus for us to have us at our table. It wasn't difficult at all. You have to correct the shvager. It was a great schus. I can't think of a bigger schus. Can't think of a bigger schus. Children and the grandchildren, we have a big job ahead of us. Very big job. We'll stay together. We'll be mechazik each other. And we won't forget the many lessons that they taught us. Biyu Hashem, Al Netzach Moshe Hashem Okim, Dima Me'al Kol Panim.
Such a Isha Chashuva. Isha Chashuva. We just learned yesterday in the Parsha, Pasuk says, Re'ei anoichi noisim v'fnechem hayom bracha u'klala. Re'ei, see in front of you the bracha and klala. So I see them Mepharshim ask, what's Lashon Re'ei? To see. It would have been more appropriate to say, Shema, hear, listen. What is Klal Yisrael supposed to be seeing over there? And also, Moshe Rabbeinu was talking in first person, as if to say that he was the Makar Bracha, the Hashem is the Makar Bracha. Why is Moshe Rabbeinu talking in first person? So the Das Kanim and the Baal Turim says very similar. They both say along the same lines that Moshe Rabbeinu is telling Klal Yisrael, Re'ei anoichi, look at me, look at my life. Klal Yisrael, observe how I conducted my life. Watch the way I did Torah, Chesed, Mitzvahs. And if you look at the way I did, I chose Toiv. I had the bracha of Klal Yisrael does the same thing. They look at the way Moshe Rabbeinu conducted himself throughout his life, and that will be also they will get the same Toiv. They will get the bracha from the Makar, from Hashem. Re'ei, look how Babi lived her life. Everything was for other people. Nothing was for herself. For herself, she wanted nothing. For everybody else, she wanted everything. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says, Amar Lahem Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai told his Talmidim, what is the proper way that a person should cling to? Rabbi Lezer Omer, Ayin Taiva. You should have a good eye in Ayin Taiva. This exactly was what Babi excelled in the midah of Ayin Taiva. Nothing for herself. Everything was always for other people. I want to say two short stories that we see that she excelled in this midah of Ayin Taiva. When they lived in Borough Park, on 48th Street, she used to have a person come for breakfast very often. He wasn't exactly 100%. He used to ask, I don't remember if it was every day, he came very often, a few times a week for sure. He used to literally make her crazy, do this, do that, make the eggs this way, 1 sugar in the coffee, 2 sugars in the coffee. Everything was always, no problem, whatever you want, we'll do it for you, no problem. She had she focused on the mission of Chesed. She totally, her Ayin Teva didn't allow her to get to other things to get in the way. Many times, as he was on the way out, after he had the whole breakfast together with Babi and Zaida, he used to ask her for some tzedel aderech, some food maybe to take for the road. And we used to see, we were little kids, we used to go to the window, he used to throw it down the store. Again, he wasn't 100%. He used to throw it always down the store. So he told Babi, you don't have to keep giving him. He throws it in the garbage. Why do you keep giving him? Babi said, no. A yid asks, we give. Her Ayin Taiva didn't allow her for everything else to get in the way. And there was another story by one of her grandchildren's Shabbos Brachas. So by the Shabbos Day Suda, there was a buffet. So at the buffet, Babi and Zaida both ended up there. Each of them were holding 2 plates. Each one was bringing food for the other person. That was Babi's midah of Ayin Taiva. We say at the end of davening, Ani Mamin, 13 Ani Mamins we say, always starts with Ani Mamin, I believe. So I saw the Mepharshim ask Akasha, the first words of a Yid, when he gets up in the morning, the first words he says is Moida Ani. So the question is, how come it's the other way around, Moida Ani? How come it's not like by the Ani Mamins? It should be Ani Moida. What's the Lashon Moida Ani? So I saw a pshat that Anshe Knesset Agdel didn't want to shtel vek. The first words out of a person's mouth in the morning is I. It's not about I. It's about the other person. It's not about I. We don't live for ourselves. That's why it says Moida Ani instead of Ani Moida. That's how Bobby lived her whole life. It wasn't about herself. It was always about the other person. The Gemara in Megillah says, the Talmidim asked the Tanoim, how come you were Zeichet Harichas Yam? The Gemara gives over there over 20 different answers. Each Tana said a different reason why they were Zeichet Harichas Yam. One person said because he never got angry in his house. Another Tana said because he never made the Bismadish into a shortcut. So the question is, the Mefarshim asked, good, so what should he do? There's 20 different things how a person was Zeichet Harichas Yam. He should do all 20? What should he do? So I heard a pshat one time that if you look in the Gemara says, they ask the same question about Maharach Yam. All the answers have the same common denominator. They all say miyamai. The Tana said miyamai. My entire life, all my life, I did kach v'kach. So that's the way to be Zeichet Harichas Yam, miyamai, to be constant, day in, day out, the same, to keep the same midas tovas that Bobby had. This was Bobby's life. Re'eh. Look at Bobby's life, how she excelled in this midah of Ayin Tova. She should be a meilot yosher for her children that were zeichet bin mekayim kibbud aim. They're a remarkable, extraordinary way. She should be a meilot yosher for them, for the whole mishpacha, for the grandchildren, for the great grandchildren. Bila amavas lanetzach amach Hashem dil miyam tapanim.
We gathered to give a kavod acharon to Bobby. Can't say it's the last kavod, because I don't know if there was a first kavod that was ever given. Bobby never allowed us to give her kavod, didn't accept honor. But she was mechubedes herself, like Chazal tell us, Eizeu mechubed ha-mechabedes habriyos. She honored others. Rabbanim told us it's Rosh Chodesh, we can be marbe, behesped, on the divrei shvach, on the nifter. The emphasis would be very difficult to say divrei hesped, proper divrei hesped. To properly express who Bobby was. An unbelievable woman, a woman of so many different kaiches. There was an element of gevura, of strength, the gevuras hanefesh, which of course played a key role in her survival during the Milchama and her atzlacha in rebuilding here in America. But at the same time, so soft, rach kechema. She could connect with anyone, with a little baby, with little children. It's very difficult to really touch up the mensch in a few words, in a few minutes. So we'll try just a little divrei shvach, the zechreinus, things that we remember. I was Eichel last week. The doctors called and they told us they don't know how much longer it will be. We went in together with my brother and my sister to get Egedin with Bobby. And we spoke with her. We don't know how much went in, but we were telling her how much love we felt. She loved us so much. And Abbas Nefesh for her children, for every Einikel, for the Ir Einiklach. And it was Kemayim Panim El Panim. Every one of Yitzchak Halatzah and the in-law children included. There was such an Ava that we felt from her towards us. She kept track until the last years when her mind wasn't as sharp, but of every Einikel, every Ir Einikel, every birthday, every anniversary, she didn't miss a thing. And all the Einiklach, the Ir Einiklach, the little ones, everyone felt that connection. And the Ava, Kemayim Panim El Panim. In one word, what comes to mind, like was mentioned, Shmuley mentioned,
I would say Bobby was selfless. There was no zich. It was all about others. It never looked for covet. It was never about herself. Always giving, giving and giving and giving. And she would give us b'chayeha. And she would tell us, she doesn't understand, she would say this all the time. People have a hard time giving in their lifetime. But she doesn't want to give with a cold hand, she wants to give with a warm hand. She loved us so much and she would just give. She was a noisein, she was not a makabel. She was selfless. And that's why, Taka, we saw the shalom bayis between her and Zaida was something so special. Actually, mentioned the Maisa with the plates, always thinking about each other. It's as if they were one person mamish. We always saw them as Bobby and Zaida was Bobby and Zaida, Gans 11, Bobby and Zaida. The Mishnah Novis, Parak Aleph, Mishnah Dalet says, "Yu beischa pesuach l'ravacha, v'yu aniyim b'nei veischa." Two instructions. Your beischa pesuach l'ravacha, your home should be opened wide. V'yu aniyim b'nei veischa, aniyim, nitzrachim, downtrodden should be b'nei veischa. Bobby excelled together with Zaida in both of these midas. Their bias was pesuach l'ravacha always, and the b'nei bias were aniyim, nitzrachim, umlalim. We remember their home in Borough Park on 48th Street. It was a small, modest home. Go up all the flights of stairs, a two-family house in Borough Park. And when you get up, it was one floor of the apartment. It was 3 small bedrooms and only 1 bathroom. But that never ever stopped Bobby from hosting Hafnasas Archim, people moving into their house for months at a time. There was a mishpacha, the Lumir mishpacha. They had a big talminim business. They would come for months before Sukkah season, and they would move in. A man from Eretz Yisrael, a Yid from Eretz Yisrael, move in. There was no such thing as we don't have space, and it's uncomfortable. Their bias was pesuach l'ravacha. It was wide open. Zaida constantly would bring people home from Shachris. He saw a nitzrach, shluchei mitzvah, different nitzrachim. He would notice someone needed something. There were no cell phones. He didn't have to call Bob beforehand. He didn't have to make sure it's okay. It was a davar pashit. A nitzrach had a place in their home on 48th Street, and Bobby would serve them a whole breakfast, take care of them. They would stay as long as they needed. V'yu aniyim b'nei veischa. She was mitzdayin in aniyim b'nei veischa. It wasn't dafka kefi rucha. Didn't stim 100% with the personality that we saw of Bobby. They have all sorts of people in the home, in the house. Emotionally disturbed people, nitzrachim. Cleanliness wasn't necessarily their strong point, to say the least. But everyone was welcome, and they weren't just welcome, they were b'nei veischa, they were a chelik of the home, they were a chelik of the bayis, they were a chelik of the family. For years, we would sit at the Pesach Seder in Borough Park together with a farsarat tefroi that wasn't well emotionally, but she was a chelik of the mishpacha, she was from the b'nei bayis, she was at the Seder. I remember when Bobby was in our house, with my parents, they would also, Kiyadua, they had people there. And Bobby would marvel sometimes at my mother's patience. And she turned to me once and she says, "You know, your mother has patience like a saint." And I said, "Bobby, and where does it come from?" Remember all those starim with Yenim and the breakfasts? And in the early years, she would say, nah. But then as she got older, the conversation repeated itself a few times. And B'Seif Yemeh, she would say to me, "Shmuli, okay." In her own little humble way. That was the chinuch that my mother and my uncle Rabbi Yitzchak, Kalavi, got in their home. And I think we can say that Be'emes, the biggest matana they left us was their children. The biggest matana they gave to us, their Mayrasha to us, is the children they raised. Uncle Avi and my Molozos and Gesundsein. And like my father said, we can't judge anyone, Khalila, from that generation, but my mother would always tell us that so many of her friends, they were all children of survivors. All of their friends in school had parents, survivors, and it wasn't always easy. Many of these people carried around baggage which we cannot even fathom, but their children felt it in many different ways. We don't have to be Meirich and Mefaret, but my mother and my uncle would be made always that they had such an emotionally healthy home. Their parents were so gesund. They grew up in a regular, happy home without a trace of anything. And the emes is, Mistama, in the early years of their marriage, when the house was still empty for a few years, until there was Zeichet HaBrach from the Belzer Rebbe, Zechainu L'Vracha. You can only imagine they nurtured each other back to health. They were mamish, like we said, like one person. When you would talk to either one of them about the Holocaust, you would hear the other's story as if it was their story. Bobby would talk about Rad Mishal as if she grew up in Rad Mishal. Zaida knew the Shtuisim Shemishal. That was the Metzias, and we can only imagine them, those earlier years, just talking it out to each other and nurturing each other back to health. And they created such an emotionally healthy home. But it's not the pshat, Chalila, that they forgot about it, they left it behind them. Hayitachin. To the contrary, they carried that with them their whole life. They were true survivors. Everything they did in their life was based upon their experiences. They were emisa Ovdei Hashem. They channeled their avdus. They were put through to be Ovdei Hashem. Never ever forgetting what they went through. And the later years they would share with us at the Starim, as the children got older, the Einiklach, and they would have reports, and we would have to interview them, and they would talk to us, and they would tell us. And they remembered everything. They carried it with them in everything they did. I remember once, I was Lebacha learning in Tel Yeshiva here, there was a chasana, one of the chaver got married in Borough Park. And we went into the chasana, a few friends from Yeshiva. It was in the winter, and we slept in their house on 48th Street. They were away. They were in Florida for the winter. Maybe still in the Palm Springs days. I don't know if maybe in California. They would go to California for a few months in the winter. And of course, they gave us their house. It was Pasuach L'Ravacha. We stayed there, a few friends, and my father was at the chasana as well. And my father was trying to explain to my friends, Bachrim, young Bachrim, what kind of home they're in, what went on in this house on a day-to-day basis. And then we had the mazel. My father opened up the freezer, and he took something out, and he showed them, in the freezer, there was a bottle of milk with maybe a quarter of a bottle left. They left the Palm Springs to California for a few months, and they had a few ounces of milk left. They weren't going to spill it down the drain. They weren't going to throw it out. They put it in the freezer. They saved it. And when they came back, they defrosted and used it, because they lived with their experiences. They lived with what they went through, and that's what made them who they were. That's what maybe made Bobby what she was. I'll be Messiah. Before my bar mitzvah, Bobby and Zaida took me and Shmuley. They gave us a present. They took us to Eretz Yisrael together with them. And we all know how much they loved Eretz Yisrael. They bought a deer in Eretz Yisrael. They were so tzefriden. They owned a shtickle. They had a shtickle Eretz Yisrael they owned. And I remember we went there and we spent the Shabbos, Hashkachat Kefriat, you weren't supposed to be with them the last Shabbos, and we were. And we were with them in their apartment in Beit Vegan on Milchlin 23. And we shall show this time. And Zaida was singing his miris, the Adamski's miris that we knew, his miris, the Chasidish's miris. And Shmuley and I were singing along, and probably Bobby was singing with us too. And we were singing Yidid Nefesh. And when we finished, Bobby and Zaida were both crying. And Bobby expressed it, and she said to Zaida, who would have thought we'll be zeiche to make it out, and to build a mishpacha, children in Einekloch, to be sitting in our own deer in Eretz Yisrael, connecting with Rebbeinu Shalom with such nachas. We appreciate everything that she did for us, Bobby. When I asked Mechila b'shem the mishpacha, all the Einekloch, some of the Einekloch asked that if we didn't show you the proper covet or care for you properly, we try to, whenever we can, to visit, to speak to our children about you as much as we can. Be'ez Hashem will continue to. Your legacy will live on in our homes. But if we fell short of showing the proper covet or the proper derech eretz, we ask Mechila. Bila amavis lanesach amach Hashem dimim al kapani b'nei marami.
The crew will take place at Waldheim Cemetery. For those who will be joining the family, we'll be lining up right in front of the Cheder, facing west on Pratt. We ask to have your headlights and hazard lights on while in procession. The family will be sitting Shiva, the Banker residence, 7061 North Kedzie Avenue, apartment 206. The Minyanim times, once we have them, we'll post them on our website, and I'm sure there'll be an email going out to the community. If we can have all the grandsons come forward, be Milava, Terrace, and if we can all rise as we leave the auditorium.